You're brilliant at what you do, David, but you're just not the kind of collaborator we need anymore. That's what he said. Direct eye contact, slick, rehearsed tone. The kind of line that sounds like feedback, but really it was a shutdown. Just like that, 20 years of loyalty were tossed aside in a 5-minute meeting, sandwiched between a strategy sync and a catered lunch tray. My name is David Langston. I'm 52 years old. And until that morning, I was head of engineering at one of the Midwest's fastest growing logistics tech firms. For 2 decades, I built systems that kept the entire operation from imploding. I wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but when things broke at 2 a.m., mine was the number they dialed. I sat across from our new CEO, Ryan, maybe 35, polished, venture-backed resume, the kind of guy who used phrases like velocity mapping and disruption loops in casual conversation. He'd been with the company for 6 months. I'd been there for 2 decades. And still, somehow, I was the one being told I didn't fit the new direction. No one from the executive team was present. Just Ryan, a bland HR rep with a company notebook and a folder with my name on it. Inside, termination paperwork, an NDA, and a pre-written LinkedIn farewell message, just in case I needed help telling the world I was grateful for getting blindsided. The kicker? They called it a realignment, said they were repositioning technical leadership to support a more agile cultural framework. I almost laughed. I'd written half the infrastructure they still relied on, trained most of the developers, held the team together through 3 ownership changes, 2 market crashes, and a ransomware breach that nearly shut us down. And now I was an obstacle because I didn't post emojis on Slack, but I didn't shout, didn't beg, didn't even raise an eyebrow. I just watched him talk and silently made a note of what I'd built, what I still controlled, because Ryan had no idea. He thought engineering was just code. He didn't realize it was also relationships, vendor contracts, licensing credentials, private deployments I'd secured personally, the legacy systems I architected that no one else fully understood, especially not the guy he planned to replace me with. By 10:14 a.m., I was out the front door, a manila envelope in one hand, a company-branded pen in the other. No badge, no goodbye party, no regrets. Not because it didn't sting. It did. But Ryan had made one critical mistake. He assumed I'd built nothing outside of code. He didn't know I'd spent years laying down quiet leverage, documentation only I could access, licensing renewals set to alert my personal email, security keys that required my sign-off and expired if I didn't renew them, and most importantly, people who trusted me. People who would take my call long after I walked out of that building. He thought I was just another guy with a GitHub account and an aging salary. What he didn't realize was that I'd become part of the company's nervous system. And when you rip out a piece of the brain, you don't get smarter. You short circuit. I wasn't always the problem. Once upon a time, I was the guy everyone came to with answers. Back in 2003, the company was barely more than an idea. No funding, no office, just a shared Dropbox folder and a vision that barely fit on a single whiteboard. They brought me in to write back-end architecture. I stayed to build a system that could survive chaos. My early days were all fire drills and duct tape. I remember configuring our first server cluster using hardware we'd salvaged from an old manufacturing plant. It was crude, but it worked. When our database melted down during our second client demo, it was me, literally me, on the floor, under the table, rerouting Ethernet just to get us back online before the VP of sales could finish his coffee. We didn't have titles back then. We had ownership. And over the years, I built not just the code, but the culture. Quiet, disciplined, resilient. If something failed, I fixed it. If someone needed help, I showed up. No spotlight, no performance review goals, just accountability. They made me head of engineering 5 years in. Not because I asked, because no one else wanted the job, and I already knew the system better than anyone alive. I led 3 major migrations, introduced the CI/CD pipeline before anyone on the team knew what those letters stood for, wrote the rollback protocol that saved us in 2014 when a bad push nearly wiped out a month of billing data. And no, I wasn't flashy. I didn't hold vision circles, didn't host Friday AMAs, didn't perform culture for the sake of performance. I just worked hard, with care, with consistency. People respected me for that. At least they used to, before everything got soft. It started slow. More HR-led initiatives. More slides about emotional alignment, more emphasis on team vibes than team output. Then came the buzzwords: psychological safety, emotional fluency, collaborative alignment, all good things in theory. But they began replacing technical rigor. I saw it happen in real time. Where we once valued results, we now rewarded visibility. The people who spoke loudest in meetings, even if they said nothing, got promoted. The ones who quietly kept everything running became invisible. Then came Ryan. He showed up in expensive sneakers, called everyone buddy, and introduced Slack workflows that felt more like therapy than work streams. Said we needed to become more relational as an org. Said if people feel emotionally unsafe in code reviews, we're doing something wrong. He wasn't the first new leader I'd seen. I'd outlasted 3 CEOs before him, but he was the first who openly implied that quiet expertise was a liability. During his first week, he called me intimidating, said I had legacy brain, that I should try smiling more when I talk. I told him that I smile when the build passes and the servers stay green. He didn't laugh. I tried. I really did. I started using emoji and status reports, asked about people's weekends and stand-ups, tried joining the new Wellness Wednesday Slack thread, but it felt like wearing someone else's skin, and everyone could tell. 6 months in, I stopped being invited to certain meetings. My proposals got delayed, my concerns dismissed. And then one day, I was no longer a leader. I was a holdover, a reminder of how things used to be. That's when I started preparing. Not because I expected to be fired, but because in my line of work, you learn to spot instability before it crashes. I backed up my documentation, created clean transition plans, tagged key assets I'd built, and most importantly, I made peace with walking away, and if it came to that, but I never thought it would end like this. Not in a sterile conference room with coffee I didn't drink, and 2 people who couldn't even look me in the eye. Not after 20 years. They didn't even say thank you, just handed me a pen and asked for a clean signature. The invite said, quick sync, ops alignment, no context. Just a 30-minute block on a Tuesday morning with Ryan and a new HR manager I'd never met, Maya. The moment I walked into the conference room, I knew. Maya didn't even open her laptop. Ryan was already seated, one ankle crossed over his knee like he was about to deliver a product demo. Hey, David, thanks for jumping in. No handshake, no small talk, just the kind of forced calm people use when they're trying to sound in control. He started with praise, the fake kind. You've done amazing work over the years. The systems you've put in place are still some of the most stable we've seen. It's been invaluable. Then came the turn, but we're heading in a new direction, a more collaborative, cross-functional, emotionally aware direction. I didn't interrupt, didn't move. We've realized that the leadership we need now, it's more about flexibility, adaptability, and culture-first alignment. He leaned forward slightly. And honestly, David, it's become clear you're just not a team player anymore. There it was. Not incompetence, not performance, just vibe disqualification. He talked for another few minutes, but I didn't hear most of it. I was watching the walls, the reflections in the glass, The way Maya avoided my eyes like she was bracing for a reaction I wasn't giving her. Then she slid the folder across the table. Standard stuff: termination letter, mutual release agreement, a padded NDA, and a helpful transitional support document with a draft resignation post to use on LinkedIn. "Feel free to personalize it," she said, voice low. "We tried to make it sound positive." Positive? There wasn't a single mention of the years I'd given, no recognition of my role in building the very structure they were now trying to repackage as agile culture. Just soft language, neutral tone, as if removing someone like me was just a routine cleanup. Ryan spoke again. "Look, this isn't personal. We're just optimizing for alignment. You'll land on your feet. I'm sure someone out there still values that kind of institutional thinking." I didn't pick up the folder, didn't touch the pen. "That kind of thinking," I said slowly, "is the only reason you're sitting in a stable system right now." He gave a small smile, tight, rehearsed. "Appreciate your contributions, David. We really do. But we're building forward now." I stood, not rushed, not angry, just steady. "I built more than systems," I said, "and someday soon you'll realize what you just let go of." I walked out with empty hands. Not because I'd forgotten anything, because everything I built was still in that room, and none of them understood it. As I left, I passed the engineering floor. It was quiet, too quiet. Half the team was remote now. The other half was junior, mostly. Smart kids, no doubt, but green. A few heads lifted when they saw me. Some confused. One gave a sympathetic nod. That was Priya, our last systems reliability hire. She probably knew. I didn't stop at my desk. Didn't log out, just walked straight out the front doors, into sunlight that felt too bright for what had just happened. I didn't call anyone, didn't send a farewell message, didn't vent on Slack. I just drove home, windows down, no music. When I got to my house, I didn't unpack the day, didn't even sit down. I walked to the garage, opened the backup drive cabinet, and stared at a folder I hadn't touched in 6 months. Exit protocol. Inside, system documentation, code snapshots, a list of failover scenarios no one else even remembered we had. I hadn't created it because I expected to be fired. I'd created it because I knew one day someone would forget why the ship stayed afloat. And when that day came, I wasn't going to be on call. I made tea, sat on the porch, and for the first time in years felt a kind of silence I hadn't known I was missing. Not the silence of being pushed aside, the silence of being free. 3 days after I left, they pushed a new update to production. It was a UI redesign, lightweight, cosmetic, supposed to improve onboarding flow by modernizing the experience, but they deployed it on top of a legacy session management system, the one I'd been warning them about for months. It couldn't handle the new call frequency. The system didn't crash, not at first, but every new user was silently timed out after 5 minutes. They lost 23% of signups in 48 hours. Didn't even realize it until support tickets started piling up from partners. I know this because Priya messaged me, not to gossip, to apologize. "They're blaming my team," she wrote, "but we followed the rollout script exactly. No one knew the session rules were baked into the metrics layer." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The next week, they launched a marketing campaign that redirected traffic to a data pipeline I'd designed 2 years ago. But no one had updated the scaling logic. Under normal conditions, it held. But under load, it duplicated entries, corrupted 2 client dashboards. One of them, a high-value logistics platform, canceled their renewal on the spot. By the end of week 2, Ryan had started forwarding emails to other engineers asking why their core functions felt brittle. Of course they felt brittle, because the only person who understood the hidden dependencies, the undocumented patchwork, holding it all together, was gone. I wasn't watching this happen with glee. This wasn't revenge porn. This was confirmation that what I'd done mattered, that silence doesn't mean absence, that legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just code no one dares delete. By week 3, Ryan sent me a LinkedIn message. "Hope you're well, David. Just wanted to say thanks again for all you built. Let me know if you're open to consulting. I read it once, then archived it. Meanwhile, I started hearing from old teammates. One of them, Janine, a senior back-end dev I'd trained, told me they'd already brought in a contractor to rebuild the reliability layer, except he was using a microservice framework that didn't play nice with our caching system. She said he claimed the problem was legacy architecture. I almost laughed. I got another message, this time from a board member. Not public, not official. Just a quiet note. Wish we'd spoken before you left. I didn't realize how much of the company's DNA had your name on it. Week 4, another incident. A billing job failed silently, no alerts, no rollback. Thousands of monthly invoices went out double charged. I had written the guardrails for that exact function. They'd been removed by one of Ryan's agile architects to make the code base cleaner. Clients started dropping. Churn spiked 19%. Uptime dropped below 99.5% for the first time in 5 years. Someone on Reddit posted a thread. They used to be bulletproof. Now they're just buggy and broken. That one stung. Not because they were right, but because they were remembering the difference. By week 5, I finally got the call from Ryan. Hey, David, I know things ended kind of suddenly. We're in a bit of a rough patch. Wondering if you'd be open to jumping back in, just for a short-term engagement. No pressure. He sounded tired, less polished, like someone who had finally realized that culture can't compensate for competence. I told him I'd think about it, then I sat with it for 2 days, not because I needed to, but because I wanted him to wait, to sit in the silence he once mistook for uselessness. Eventually, I replied, happy to consult, but only on my terms. He agreed within 10 minutes, didn't even ask the rate. He just said, please, we need the help. I didn't do it to gloat, didn't raise my price to punish them. I did it because I wasn't going back as a team player. I was going back as a specialist, someone who gets called when everything else has failed. What they didn't know was I'd already mapped out what was wrong. The moment I saw that they deployed without guardrails, I knew exactly which parts of the code base were fragile, which dependencies were decaying, which patches had been removed to make things look cleaner on paper. Day 1 of the audit, I sent over a single document, critical fail points by priority. It was a list of 14 systems, color-coded with notes like failover logic. Day 1 of the audit, I sent over a single document, critical fail points by priority. It was a list of 14 systems, color-coded with notes like failover logic, removed March 3rd, reintroduced throttling, auth loop risk during multi-session login, inherited from 2020 build. Legacy cache sweep no longer runs. Risk of silent data rot. No fluff, no commentary, just the blueprint of everything that was about to collapse and how to stop it. Janine called me the next day. I didn't realize how bad it was. She sounded exhausted. She'd been one of the good ones, sharp, no ego. We'd worked closely on the platform migration in 2019. David, she said quietly, I think you're the only person who can actually fix this. I didn't say thank you. Didn't say I told you so. I just got to work. For 2 weeks, I patched blind spots, rewrote edge case handling, reintroduced rollback triggers they didn't even know they'd removed. I didn't ask for credit, didn't ask for permission. I just delivered a working system. And every time something stabilized, they acted like it was magic, like it couldn't possibly be that simple. It wasn't simple. It was invisible work, the kind no one celebrates, the kind people forget until it's gone. And now that it was gone, they finally saw it. Meanwhile, Ryan kept sending me updates. Just wanted to say thanks again. Things are looking better. The board's noticing, uptime's improving. If you're open to extending past the 60 days, let's talk. I didn't respond, not yet. Midway through week 3, I got a message from one of the board members, the same one who'd quietly emailed me before. Can you talk off the record? We're reevaluating leadership. Would love your perspective. I declined the call, but I did send a note. It's not my company to fix. I just want the systems to work. That was the truth. I wasn't trying to get Ryan fired. I wasn't gunning for a full-time offer. I wasn't there to win. I was there to finish. The truth is, I didn't miss the title, didn't miss the paycheck, didn't miss the meetings or the all hands or the slide decks. What I missed was the craft, the code, the clarity, the quiet, elegant feeling of building something that just works and knowing no one else could have done it quite like you. By the end of the contract, the system was stable again. Uptime restored, data clean, client churn reversed. They asked if I'd stay on. This time, Ryan didn't use buzzwords. "We made a mistake," he said. "You weren't the problem. We were. I hope you'll come back. We'll do it right this time." I looked at the message for a while, then deleted it, because the truth is, I didn't need to go back. Not anymore. They'd already made the mistake. I had already walked away. And now I was finally free to choose. I didn't go back. Not because I was angry, not out of pride, and not because I wanted revenge. I didn't go back because I didn't need to anymore. For the first time in 2 decades, I was free from the noise. No more performance reviews, no more budget meetings, no more culture surveys written by consultants who couldn't write a line of working code if their Wi-Fi depended on it, just silence. And in that silence, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Clear. The truth is, I didn't leave that job the day they fired me. I left the day I realized my presence had become invisible. The moment too experienced became a liability. The moment culture became more important than competence. That's when I started preparing. Not to fight, not to sabotage, just to survive the fall with my name intact. I used part of the consulting money to set up a small workspace in my garage. Clean desk, good chair, proper coffee. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. I started freelancing again, slowly on my terms. A few architecture reviews for mid-stage startups, some consulting for dev teams trying to untangle their own legacy messes. It felt real, honest. I wasn't a culture fit. I was a problem solver, and now people paid for that directly. A fintech startup in Chicago sent me a message after our first project. "You understood our infrastructure in 3 days better than our last CTO did in 6 months." I smiled when I read that. Not because it was praise, but because it was proof. Proof that I still mattered, that quiet skill still had value, just not always in the places I'd once expected. Occasionally, someone from the old company would ping me. A junior engineer with a debugging question, a support lead asking where a deprecated script might be hidden. I helped when I could. No drama, no bitterness, just one craftsman helping another, because in the end, the work was never the problem. Ryan eventually left the company. I heard through Janine. She called one afternoon just to catch up. He was burned out, couldn't fix morale, bored, lost patience. I didn't ask for details, didn't celebrate, I just nodded. The system corrected itself. Eventually, it always does. The company hired a new vice president of engineering, a quiet guy from Vancouver with a background in systems architecture. Janine said his first move was restoring the team's autonomy. His second was writing a handbook called Infrastructure First. She sent me a screenshot. Page 1 quoted something I'd once said in a meeting 5 years ago. "If no one notices the system, it means it's working." That one made me sit still for a moment, not because I needed recognition, but because I realized I hadn't been erased after all. The right things leave their mark quietly. I still walk by the old office sometimes, not often, just when I'm in that part of town grabbing groceries or passing through. It's bigger now. More polished. The lobby has new branding, new furniture, but I see the shape of what we built underneath it all. I see the bones. And I know, even if no one else walking through those halls knows my name, they're still walking on top of my work. Sometimes I wonder how many companies have someone like me, the invisible force keeping everything stitched together until they're quietly shown the door. Not because they failed, but because they stopped being fashionable. People forget that not all foundations are loud. Some just hold the weight until someone mistakes silence for irrelevance, and that's enough. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. Inside was a thank you card from a former intern, Lucas. I'd taught him how to write automated tests back in 2017. At the time, I thought he was too quiet to make it. Turns out he's now head of engineering at a logistics startup in Seattle. He wrote, "You once told me to stop focusing on looking useful and start being useful." That advice changed my life. I still run code reviews the way you showed me. He included a sticker from his new company. I stuck it on the inside of my desk drawer. Some legacies don't need buildings or plaques. Sometimes it's just a line of logic that never breaks, a system that doesn't crash, or a piece of advice that turns into someone else's foundation. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't get loud. I just walked away and let the silence speak louder than anything I could have said.